YouTube. Good luck.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to get started in about a minute or two. Hi, everyone. For those of you just logging on, we're going to get started in about 1 minute. Okay, good morning, students, staff members, administrators, and community members.
Thank you for being here today and taking part in District 113's Genocide Commemoration Day.
My name is Lexi Cohn, and I'm a senior at Highland Park High School.
My name is Ariel Rosenberg, and I'm a junior at Deerfield High School. And today we are joined by our incredible team of student leaders, seniors Ezra Horton, Stephanie Kalish, Anna Robb, Leah Seidman, and Ariel Weil, juniors Julie Elbaum, Samantha Feinberg, Stephen Noble, Jessica Shade, Elena Miller, and Cooper Wallman, and freshman Joshua Horwich, as well as our faculty sponsors, Ms. Antonakos, Mr. Bryzowitz, Mr. Filer, Ms. Linder, Ms. Meyer, and Ms. Dunitzer.
We would like to give a special thank you to the to our family members, school board members, and administrators for their support.
In 2015, Andrew Division, who was a Deerfield High School sophomore at the time, founded Genocide Commemoration Day in memory of the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide and to honor his family members who were victims and survivors. Since then, it has evolved to become not only a day to reflect on the past, but a comprehensive day of honor, education, and action about hate, mass atrocities, and genocide of all forms. We have and will continue to ask a lot of each and every one of you, and we hope that this commitment to commemorating past genocide victims and helping to stand up for current and future ones will not stop when you leave here today. As Andrew always says, try and take one thing, one fact, image, name, or story, and remember it. Hold on to it and carry it with you, and then share it.
We're so fortunate to have my grandpa, Mr. Kurt Gutfreund, here to speak today. He is a survivor of the Holocaust. He was very young at the time, much younger than most of us are right now. He was liberated from Theresienstadt at age 7. After the war, he returned to Vienna with his mother, where he was raised and eventually immigrated to the United States in 1958, where he had the opportunity to continue on with his life and his career, as well as start a family of his own. He continues to be an activist by sharing his story, recognizing the importance of education to ensure the message never again.
We are going to drop a link in the chat for a Google form where you can type up and ask any question for our speaker. You can also find this link on our website under History Unfolding and the homepage under Watch the Speakers. Please feel free to ask questions this way throughout the entire presentation, and at the end, we will ask as many questions as we will have time for. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Gutfreund.
You can start.
Good morning. I was born January 6th, 1938 in Vienna, Austria. 2 months later, on March 11th, Hitler marched into Austria and annexed Austria to Germany. So Austria, for the time of the World War II, didn't exist anymore. It became a province of Germany. My father, his name was Heinrich, or my mother called him Heini, which is a nickname. He was deported on June 9th, 1942, to a place called Mali Trostenets, which is near Minsk. Can I?
I can do it on my computer. Do you see my cursor?
Okay. I want to show where Minsk is. Okay. This is Minsk. This is Vienna. And Minsk is in what's today Belarus. At the time, it was part of the Soviet Union. It was occupied by the Germans. Upon arrival, there was no camp there. The people, when they arrived after a 6-day train journey from Vienna, they had to go into the woods, and they were killed all immediately on the day that they arrived. My grandfather was taken on the first transport from Vienna to Theresienstadt, and after 3 months, I think, he was sent to Poland in Treblinka and killed there. My mother and I, we went into hiding, and towards the end of 1942, they caught us. And on January 6th, my 5th birthday, my mother and I, we were sent to Theresienstadt. In Czech, it's called Terezin. And my mother worked in the camp. And I want to now tell you a little bit about Theresienstadt. It was constructed between 1780 and 1790 as an Austrian fort. Later, it became a village, and in 1942, 7,000 Czechs were expelled, and the concentration/ghetto was established. Of 144,000 people sent to Theresienstadt, a quarter died in Theresienstadt of deadly conditions, hunger, stress. Towards the end of the war, especially the typhus conditions toward the end of the war, 88,000 were deported to the east and murdered. By the end of the war, 17,247 remained. 242 children younger than 15 survived deportation to the east. And I'm one of the lucky 242 children. And so, and my mother was working slicing mica. Mica is a mineral that was used in the 30s and 40s for electronics. And the Germans were working on some radar, and I guess they needed mica. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were never sent to the East. I don't know why we were so lucky to stay in Theresienstadt for 2.5 years, because most people, like my grandfather, were sent after 3 months away. Now, my mother was not 100% Jewish. She was what's called a Mischling. She was a mixture of Jewish and non-Jewish Christian person. My maternal grandmother was Jewish, but my maternal grandfather was Catholic. And I think that had something to do that we stayed there in Theresienstadt. I'm not sure. I have not been able to find out what's the reason we were so lucky that we stayed there. And my mother had 2 other siblings, 2 sisters. One had left Austria in 1939 with her husband, and she went to Bogota, Colombia for the war. And when my aunt was born, my grandparents got divorced at some point, and my grandfather said, my youngest must be brought up as a Catholic. She went to Catholic school, she was educated by nuns, and she was a Catholic. And she was able to stay in Vienna because she worked for an attorney that was able to protect her. And she was able to stay as a Mischling in Vienna. And she sent us packages every week, 1 package, 2 packages, 3 packages. And we were able to receive them. And we could only answer and most of the correspondence between my mother and her sister, we could only respond with thank you, we received it. Can you go to show some cards? Okay, here are some cards. And in between the address, my mother asked for something. Now here it shows Renee Doable, that's my aunt's maiden name, and doable doesn't mean anything, and but she wanted Knoblauch, she wanted garlic, and in Viennese, it's Knobel is garlic. And so my mother asked for that. And here's some further cards. You see the Hitler picture there. Here's go ahead. Here, there's something else. I don't know what she wanted here. Now, sometimes she was able to write a lot of things. I have no idea where my mother accessed a typewriter. Go ahead. In most cards, you could only write thank you, received the package of such and such date. Now, my aunt kept every one of these cards and every one of the packages that she sent, she received a receipt. And so I got those cards eventually. And about 15 years ago, I decided to give those to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. The Holocaust Museum as it stands today, doesn't exist and didn't exist. And afterwards, they asked me, would you like to have a valuation what they're worth? And I said, are they worth anything? And they said, yes. And they gave me a name of a appraiser from the Library of Congress, and he put the value of $15,000 on it, which was a nice tax deduction for me that year. And so we were able to get all these packages. So that's okay. Now, one day, my best friend and his mother or parents were called up on a transport to go to the east. Now, at the time, people in Theresienstadt didn't know that the east meant usually death. Because on the first transport from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz, they showed a special camp there, which wasn't so bad, and people wrote back, it's okay here, it's more or less the same as Theresienstadt. And I wanted to go with my friend. I didn't want to lose my friend. So I begged my mother, and she said no. I begged her and begged her. So finally, she agreed, and we went to the train station, and we went on up on the train, and the Germans, as you know, are very well organized and everything must be correct. Obviously, our name was not on the list. So the guys that were supervising the transport slapped my mother in the face and threw us off the train. Otherwise, I don't think we would be here today. We were liberated on May 8th, 1945, which happens to be also the day that World War II in Europe ended. The Germans had surrendered, and my mother and I, my mother, she had heard about the many diseases that they brought, that inmates from the eastern concentration camps were sent back to the West on the death marches. And so my mother decided we're going to walk out of the camp. We're not going to wait for reparation. And we walked and hitchhiked from Theresienstadt to Prague. The mileage between the two places is about 70 kilometers, which is about 40 miles. So it's not that far. And from Prague to Vienna, we got a ride on a truck, and we arrived in Vienna. And the first few months, we stayed in a small pension. A pension is basically if somebody has a big apartment and they rent out some rooms that they don't need, and we stayed there. And I forgot to tell you, my mother had taught me how to read and write in the camp. every night after work, she taught me. I remember her, how she drilled me in the multiplication and math, but I was pretty good at math. That was always my favorite subject. And so we returned to Vienna, and I went right away to second grade, which is the grade that by my age I'm supposed to get into, because I was able to read and write a little bit and do some math. So I had no problems in the school. Later on, I think around the fourth or fifth grade, my mother sent me to to the Lycée Français de Vienne, which is the French Lyceum, which originally was meant for the French occupying soldiers' kids. And I got my education there. And at age 14, I decided I wanted to come to the States. But at the time, it took 5 to 6 years to get a visa for somebody that was born in Austria. Visas were issued, immigration visas were issued strictly on the basis which country you were born in, not what country you were a citizen of from, but the country you were born in. I was born in Vienna, and so I belonged to the Austrian quota. So at age 14, I applied, and when it became time in 1957, they told me I could get a visa to the States, and if I had somebody that was guaranteeing for me that I would not become a burden to the U.S. state. Now, at the same time, at age 14, I wanted to stop going to school and apprentice for a trade. And I wanted to become a merchant, a businessman, basically. And in Austria at the time, you apprenticed for that. And my mother insisted that if I don't go to school, her preference would be for me going to school. But if I'm not going to school, I must learn something to do with my hands. Now, why did she say this? It's because people in Theresienstadt, men who had a trade, electricians, carpenter, tailors, whatever, had a better chance to survive because they needed people to make things or plumbers to fix things. So I became an optician. Now, the day that I became an optician was the last day that I worked as an optician, as I worked with my hands. And then my visa came about, and so I came to the United States. I came to Chicago because my aunt, who had emigrated to Bogota, Colombia, had met a man in at the Mayo Clinic, and they both divorced their spouses, and she married this guy and moved to Chicago, and that's how I wound up in Chicago. In Chicago, my first job was as a salesman at the old Fair store, which was at the time on State and Adams, where all the department stores were. And my starting salary was $1 an hour. Eventually, I became an assistant buyer at the store. I met my first wife there, and I worked there for a couple of years. And then I started working for children's wear wholesaler. And I worked there, and as a children's wear wholesaler, we were selling small stores. And the small stores were going slowly out of business. So I saw the writing on the wall, and I said, we must become an importer. And I went on my first trip in 1971 to the Far East, and we started to import. And eventually, I bought the company and became only an importer, and we imported children's outerwear. And I became, knock on wood, quite successful. And I sold the business 3 times. I retired about 15 years ago or so. And I have 3 children. Go ahead, Lexi, go to the pictures. Okay, oh, here's some pictures of Theresienstadt. Okay, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. Now, this is, my mother tried everything not to be considered Jewish, and she went and got the Aryan Ausweis, somebody that's Aryan, not Jewish. Now, most people that got this were people that wanted to get in the Nazi party, because as a Jew, you couldn't join the Nazi party. And scroll down a little bit, please. And here you see my paternal grandparents, and et cetera, et cetera. Now here by my grandmother, all it says MOS, which means Mosaic, and that means Jewish. Mosaic is another way of naming people. Okay, go ahead. Now, here are some pictures. That's me as a little guy. And my mother and me. I had blonde and curly hair. Go ahead. That's also me. That's my mother. She was voted the most beautiful sales lady in Vienna in 1926. That's my mother and my father. And that's my mother and father skiing in the Alps. Go ahead. This is just a general picture of the Theresienstadt. Go ahead. Now that's me as a 15-year-old. We were with an organization which was a Jewish organization called Shomer HaTzair, and it was a very left-leaning, and they were promoting immigration to Israel. Go ahead. Now that's me as around my bar mitzvah time. This is what I looked like when I came to the States. Now also this one, go ahead. This is some pictures in the 80s. Go ahead. That's my mother and me later on. And these are the three girls. This is my Aunt Herma, who lived in Chicago, my mother, and my Aunt Renee. Go ahead. And now this is a picture of go ahead. I have three children. I have my son, David, who is 59, my daughter, Leslie, who is a little younger than he is, and my younger daughter, who is 25. She just had her 25th birthday. This is my granddaughters, Lexi and Danny. Go ahead.
That's it.
Go ahead.
There's no more. That's the end of your slides.
That's it?
Yeah. But do you want to tell the ring story?
What?
Do you want to tell the ring story? Your mom's ring?
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. Okay. My mother, okay, my father was a goldsmith, and he made the wedding bands for himself and my mother when they got married. And he said to her, "You know it's gold. I know it's gold, and I'm not going to put the mark in and pay the few shillings that it cost for the tax." And so when my mother and I arrived in Theresienstadt, you had to give your money away, and you had to give your jewelry away. Now, when my mother took off her wedding band, she gave it to the SS guy. He looked at it. He didn't see the mark. He asked his partner, look at it. He said, "Oh, give her back the metal ring." So my mother kept the ring in the camp. She wanted to sell it for a loaf of bread, but couldn't because it didn't have the mark. So my mother has the ring until today. Leslie, my older daughter, Lexi's mom, didn't use it. So maybe my young daughter, Hetty, will use it. And that's basically my story. Let me just look if I forgot something else. No, that's my story. Now you can ask me questions.
Thank you so much for telling your story. So I'm going to read you some questions that students have sent in. So the first one says, were you able to remain connected to your Judaism during the Holocaust? And how did your perception of Judaism change due to the Holocaust?
Did you hear?
Well, I didn't hear
Okay.
all complete.
Were you able to remain connected to your Judaism during the Holocaust? And how did your perception of Judaism change due to the Holocaust?
No, we were not religious, so we didn't practice in the camp. No, I didn't have any connection. And I feel very Jewish, but I'm Jew, period. I'm a Jew, period.
Okay, the next question is, how much real progress would you say that we've made in combating anti-Semitism, and where do you see areas in need of growth, and then areas that you think have improved?
Well, we didn't make that much progress. I think we're really in a bad place. Anti-Semitism is bigger than it's been a long time. I mean, it was in the late 30s. A lot of anti-Semitism was in the States, and now it's again here. It's not good. And we have to educate you young people. You have to know you should be good people. You shouldn't be bad.
So the next question was, what led you to start telling your story about survival from the Holocaust? And was there ever a time when you hesitated to tell your story?
No, there was never a time that I hesitated to tell my story.
Okay, prior to the atrocities of the Holocaust, do you recall directly or indirectly experiencing anti-Semitism?
My mother told me a story that she took me to a park, and I was playing around in the park, and there was a soldier, and he said I was a cute guy, etc., etc. And I told him, "Don't touch me, I'm Jewish." But before the war, I don't remember basically anything.
So a reoccurring question we got was, as a high school student, what can we do to share your story?
What, repeat it?
As a high school student, what can someone do to help spread the stories of the Holocaust?
Well, you can talk about it, and you can live by example to be a person that is good, that doesn't dislike because people are different than you are. So that's what you can do. I mean, live by example.
Who do you feel like was the most influential person in your life?
My mother.
Can you elaborate as to why?
Well, my mother protected me. I survived. She loved me. She just was a great person, and I loved her very much, and she influenced me.
And then someone asked if you could just elaborate more on your day-to-day life during the Holocaust.
Your day-to-day life, what did that look like while you were in the camp?
Well, I was playing with other kids. We were playing soccer. We were playing carrying people in wheels that passed away because they took them to the crematorium. That's what we saw. I remember going once to steal some coals in a cellar, and like I said, I don't have, thank goodness, for me, a lot of memory. I'm very fortunate. I have no nightmares. I sleep well. And because I don't remember much, I don't have, like a lot of people that survived, nightmares.
Did you have any expectations for the United States? And then would you say that they exceeded your expectations, met them, or didn't live up?
Well, I liked it well enough to stay in the States, because I obviously had the option of going back to Vienna. I do go back to Vienna nowadays often. Obviously, this year I couldn't go I mean, last year I couldn't go, with exception I was there in January and March, just before everything closed down. Normally I go 6 times to Vienna. I love the food there, and I have a lot of friends from my youth in Vienna still that live there.
Someone asked if you had a normal bar mitzvah experience during or post the Holocaust.
Can you elaborate on your bar mitzvah after the Holocaust?
My bar mitzvah was not a big thing. It happened that some cousin from Argentina was in Vienna, and he took me out for dinner after the actual bar mitzvah in the temple, and for a meal. That was my bar mitzvah. It wasn't a big thing like bar mitzvahs are here. I just had dinner with that cousin and my mother. That was it.
What advice would you give to younger generations to keep these stories alive? Like, what's your message to younger people?
Like I said, be good, be tolerant, especially of people that are different than you are, and vote.
Someone asked or said, were children branded with identifying numbers, and did you have one?
No, the only place that you mean a number on the arm.
Yeah.
The only place that you were tattooed was Auschwitz. No other camp was tattooing people. Auschwitz was the only place. In Theresienstadt, you weren't tattooed.
When you moved to America, did you experience or see a lot of anti-Semitism?
Not really. The only time that I had it, I was building a home on Sheridan Road in Wilmette, and somebody wrote in the new cement Jew, and that was it. I mean, that's really the worst that I had, that I remember here.
What can you tell us about, if you remember, who helped you and your mother when you first came to the United States?
Can you elaborate on who helped you come to the States?
Who helped me come to the States? Well, obviously my aunt helped me to come to the States. And actually an uncle in England helped because he paid my ship voyage. I came on a ship called the SS Liberté, which was a nice ship. And he paid for that. And I went by train from Vienna to England and took the boat from England to New York.
And then as part of a follow-up question to that, do you think the US should be doing more for refugees today?
Yes.
Okay. The next question is, did you ever meet someone who didn't believe your story?
Who didn't believe? No.
And then another question was, how many children were kind of where you were over the course of the war? Do you know around how many people?
Well, in Theresienstadt during the Holocaust, there were supposedly around 15,000 children under the age of 15 that went through Theresienstadt. Of those 15,000, 242, according to Yad Vashem, were survived.
And then another question is, did your childhood influence the way you raised your kids?
I think so, but yes and no. Well, I spoiled your mother terribly. She became a spoiled brat. My son isn't that spoiled for what, I mean, okay.
The next, I guess that might be all of the questions.
Yeah, there's one more, and it says, how have the horrors that you experienced or heard about during the Holocaust affected you as a person?
Lexi?
How has the Holocaust affected you as a person?
You know, exactly, I don't know, but it affected me. I mean, nowadays I think very often, why were my mother and I so lucky to survive when so many others perished? But yeah, it must have, obviously, all your experiences in your life have something that have influenced you.
Can you talk about the feelings that you felt when you were liberated, if there was still fear, and then after liberation, how you felt? Were you still fearful?
After liberation, no, I wasn't that fearful. No.
Okay, awesome. Hold on one second. Sorry, tech issues. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. One second. Okay, thank you so much, Opapa, for taking the time to speak with us. We're very grateful to hear the stories like yours.
Our generation may be the last one fortunate enough to hear directly from Holocaust survivors, and as such, we have a responsibility. It is essential that we all put forth an effort to share these stories. We hope you all will join us in the movement to truly work towards the goal of never again through education about the Holocaust and other genocides and mass atrocities.
We hope that all of you who have listened to this incredible story have also had a chance to hear from our other speakers. We encourage you to go to our website at historyunfolding.org to see the other resources we developed for you. In the past months, many of you have had the opportunity to engage in our own variation of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's History Unfolded project. This time with a focus on hate in the United States and in the unfolding of the Uyghur genocide. You will find that research under our projects page.
In addition, please review the photographs and read the stories of various genocide survivors, victims, and rescuers with connection to District 113 through an exhibit we created based on Luigi Toscano's traveling exhibit, Lest We Forget. We also have a Take Action page with simple actions you can take to stop the spread of hate in the United States, to fight against the ongoing genocide of the Uyghur people, and to learn techniques for bystander intervention. In recent years, we lobbied to encourage the passage of the historic Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Act.
Most importantly, don't forget the stories you heard today and the millions of stories of other genocide and mass atrocity victims, and let those guide you in being an upstander against hate and injustice. As the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum reminds us, what you do matters.
Thank you again to Mr. Gutfreund and to all of you attending.
Thank you.